It is Monday, 8 o'clock in the evening, and I welcome you to the presentation of my Politics and Power feature as advertised. So we're starting bang on time. I'm happy that you're here. I'm looking forward to sharing some views on the topic for today, which is the spread of radical populism and its possible impact on global election outcomes. That's the feature, the theme of what I'm going to present. I'm not going to actually explain the full details of populism because populism is something that I think we all generally understand. But my focus is on the radical form of populism and what possible outcomes one may see in terms of global politics coming out of this more radical form of a movement which is not new. I mean, you could trace the roots of populism back to the mid 19th century. So we're not going to be dealing with the history and how this idea rose. We are dealing with it right now as it is manifested in the radical sense. And we're going to look at maybe one or two unit countries, see where election results might have gone, and what probably is in the making. I do this program as part of my remit to give back to the public something that I got from the public, which is the background, the use of their intellect, the surveys, the research, everything that I've done thus far to get me to the point that I am today. So this program is my way of giving back and staying connected with the grassroots because it's something that we should do as people who are skilled in a particular field of endeavor. So politics and power is my give back, my way of staying connected and of seeking to empower people who rely on information such as what I'm sharing today. So we're dealing with populism, the radical form of it, and how it possibly may impact global election outcomes. And you may ask me, well, even before we get into that, let me just make a couple of passing comments because, again, for public and complete transparency, I am a professor of politics, but I'm from the native island of Dominica. My practice of politics, as in terms of the professorship, takes place in the US. And because my country, Dominica, has found itself in a sort of political quagmire, for want of a better expression, for the past quarter century, the country has endured one ruling group, one incumbent, one party, one government. I believe it is necessary that people who understand political stalemate and the possible abuse of incumbency control, and some other people use other adjectives to allude to the Dominican government. But I am not in a position to so categorize beyond a super heavy incumbency that has been imposing on the will of the people for probably too long. That is safe to say. Other people say other things about the leader and the government. Again, that I really don't really have to. It's good for them to say it, but it's better for me to stick with the cordial nature of speaking about individuals, even if they are less than cordial towards people, including me. But as someone who has been trained to disseminate information to the public in a way that is palatable to all, almost, I prefer to say that the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica is a government that has been in office for a while. They have enjoyed super incumbency advantage and privileges, and probably they have overstayed in terms of the power structure of the country. And we know that Dominica is declared a democracy, and it is just not in keeping with what a thriving, healthy democracy is to have one group in office for so long. So I'm not a defender of any governing style or any ideology, but for those people who believe that for a democracy to be healthy, there must be constant change of people in office and power, I think this is warranted in Dominica's case, and the democracy will be healthier when this current group is gone and other groups replace that group, and then the replacement of groups continue to turn over. So because I am from that country and the country has been enduring and I am in the field, I want to speak a little bit about that and to say that the right moves need to be made by the right people who are opposing the incumbent. And until those right moves are made, and in Dominica's case, there must be an amalgamation of ideas and efforts to take on a very well entrenched incumbency. And until and unless this is done, that incumbency government will continue. I'm hearing talks about an early election in Dominica, early general elections, snap elections. We had elections a couple of years ago, and it appears as if elections could also be used again as a strategy, which is what elections are used for in those smaller democracies, when a prime minister can call an election whenever he or she finds it fit. So I expect the prime minister to, whenever he believes in Dominica that the election is going to suit him, to call the elections. And I wouldn't be surprised if a snap elections is called. I mean, going back in terms of history of how things have been done in Dominica, I would not be surprised. Probably some may say he ought not do it. Morally, it is wrong, but in politics, the calculations does not sometimes follow what is morally correct or what is even fair. In those small democracies, the prime minister can, and chances are he might. But there are other things happening as well that I will not speak about in terms of a sort of transition from at the helm of the incumbent party. That is another conversation to be had at some other time. I hope that the other factions who are interested in the power politics of our country do what is best by the country, not by the party, to challenge and possibly replace the incumbent Dominican government. Again, in the interest of complete transparency, I would have to be counted as someone who is opposed to the idea that one party controls power for so long in a small democracy, in a young democracy. There are also policies probably that the government has implemented, which I may not 100% support, but I'm not against the individuals. I just wish that the governing policies were done differently and that there was more constant revolution of the people in office. So that is where I am on the issue of the politics of that particular country, which is my native country, and we all have the rights to so do. Again, I'm being quite transparent with my words. There's also politics, well, elections taking place in America. We're under a month away from elections, general elections, to elect the president. And we have two candidates contesting. Neither of the two are incumbents. Kamala Harris, who is the Democratic leader, Democratic candidate, Democratic Party candidate, she is from the incumbent team, party presidency. She is the vice president currently of America, but she's running for the first time as president. And I believe the opponents are trying to pin her as the incumbent and saying that she's more of the same. And the guys who are trying to replace her, number 45, the 45th president of America, I never call his name professionally as a courtesy. I don't make reference to his name because one, his name is a brand and I don't promote brand. And I think it is the best professional thing to do to refer to him by his number. And number 45, or President 45, or Mr. 45, is pitching himself as the change candidate, which is a bit tricky as well because he is a former incumbent and he was changed. So he's now saying that I am the change again. So that is what has been played out in America. And he also is a populist leader. I will speak a little bit about that. Not about him necessarily, but about that when I talk about the program, the title, well, the framing that I've given to my program for this particular episode. So these are the kind of icebreakers, so to speak, the Dominican scenario and the American scenario. I can speak about other scenarios as well. You know, we can speak about the Middle East. And I can go at length to speak about Israel and the endless wars which Israel seems to be provoking, and the different radical groups that are pointing guns at Israel right now, and America's role in all of that, trying to manage what could be an escalated war in the East. But we don't have that on my agenda for today. Probably some other time I'll discuss that. Also, there is war in Africa, parts of Africa. There's war in Europe, Russia's war on Ukraine. So we can speak about those conflicts and those issues. But again, time for that. I want to talk about the rise of radical populism and its impact on elections. So populism is a concept that seeks to promote the people against the elites. Not necessarily the majority of the people, but populism refers to the people as the group which opposes a governing elite, a cultural elite, an educational elite, an economic elite. And some people who are populist leaders are part of some social elites as well. But they would have you believe that they lead the charge for people and on behalf of people against an entrenched group of individuals who are wholly corrupt. So elitism is the sort of focus of populism. And again, you might be confused because most of the populist leaders belong to some wealthy elite. They were part of the governing elite, but they would come in there on the heels of on the argument that they are the change candidate and their intention is to weed out the corrupt elements within society and government to deliver the government back to the people. So it's us versus them when it comes to populism. We, the people, which is not always all the people, but a group of people who are seen as the us against a system that is wholly corrupt, that do not know better, that is bereft of skills and the ability to run a country effectively. And no one else but us, we the people, know better. That's populism in a nutshell. And populism is not an ideology that stands alone. It connects itself to other ideologies. So populist leaders can come from the right or from the left. Maduro was a populist leader who came from the left. And he used socialism and ism to strengthen his brand of populism. And number 45 is a populist leader who veers to the right. And he uses conservatism, extreme form of it, that is, MAGAism, to promote his popularism. So popularism is not a right or left ideal. It's anywhere it goes based on what ideology that is used to bolster the movement. And as I said before, the populist movement pitches the us against the them. It also promotes a sort of moral compass which says that the us stand on the better side of morality. Even the us, sometimes the leader of those populist movements, are not seen as the best moral subjects. But the excuse is no one is perfect, and we are not creating an opportunity to elect a priest. We are electing somebody to take care of our affairs. So it does not matter if our populist leader has a flaw or has fundamental flaws. We are fine. It is you who is not fine. So that's elitism in a nutshell. And I made reference of that's populism in a nutshell. And I made reference of two populist leaders, one to the left and one to the right. I don't have to make so many examples of those leaders because I don't really have to get down to discuss the characteristic of the leaders. My mandate is to look at the impact that populism, that is more radical, can have on global elections. And I'm almost halfway through my program because, as you guys know, I don't spend a lot of time discussing the issues because I know some people sometimes are pressed for time and the attention span can be very short in certain cases. So now that you have understood populism, what it is about, what it is built on, there can be tragedies that could follow that particular trend if it is extremely radical. And most times populism veers off in radical spheres because of just how it is built. And I'm going to use America as an example in terms of what some are saying is best for the country. And it is that when number 45 was in office, the economy was better, people were seeing their way better, there was more money flowing. That's it. And immigration was better managed. And that's it. The other side, who is trying to become the chief administrator of the United States, is saying that there has been so much chaos in this populist movement that I would like to create a situation where there is normalcy, where we reunite the country, where we safeguard democracy, and we promote progressive engagement in America. So this is the argument on one side and the argument on the other side. And one would think that probably the argument of unity of purpose, progress, development, respect for law and order, protecting democracy, safeguarding America, seeking towards enhancing, would ring a greater bell than the one that is saying, well, money is what really worked and we want to protect America and make America great. Again, the idea is a more holistic, a more involved, a more united approach would ring a greater bell than the other one. No, I'm not taking any sides, because when I teach the government, I don't take sides. I'm just using the example with this particular election to show that it is very likely that a populist leader wins the election in America for the second time. And for the people who support the populist leader, the reason they support the populist leader is not for the things that we know traditionally about America, not for the niceties, but for the in-your-face rebuke to the system which the populist movement has seen and discarded as corrupt. The status quo, the swamp, the old vanguards. Now, the argument will be made by the people. I'm just here trying to present a program and to show what the future outcomes of elections could be in America and other places where radical populists kind of get a hearing. Because right now, when we check in terms of the elections in America, the opinion polls suggest that either side can win, because the populist movement is as popular as the traditional American movement. And if the populist movement wins, a lot of things will change in the system. And again, I'm not telling you who you should vote for or what side you should be on. I'm just using America as a case study to make the case. We'll see how the election goes at the end. November 5 is the general elections, and we will find out. But that does not negate the fact that I'm using the present setup to explain where we are right now. Populist movement suggests that the old way of doing business should be abandoned, and no one who is trying to get into government on the traditional side is capable. They're all idiots, to quote the people on the populist side directly. And we know best. It is only us. If the other side wins, it's going to be chaos and mayhem. When the other side is saying, if the populist side wins, it's going to be chaos and mayhem. Chances are America could again have a populist leader in charge of the administration of the country. And there are other countries around the world that have been voting populist leaders more often than before. And the question is, how is that going to impact the future of elections moving forward? I believe that the populist movement will continue to rise and people will find ways to win elections, because it is an interesting strategy to adopt to win elections. When you go against the status quo and just dismiss everything as corrupt and not working, people sometimes react to those things. But the problem is, what impact will this have on the future? How does popularism enhance systems around the world? How does it procure governments? How does it lead to progress? Do we have short-term gains and probably long-term fallouts? I'm not here to make any predictions. My particular topic says the spread of radical populism and its possibly impact on global elections outcome. And my view is that it will continue to feature very highly in global elections. And when I say it, I mean radical populism, not just populism as a concept, but the radical form. Because and we see the results of it already, guys. At least in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez was a radical populist who totally radically transformed the system. And Years after his death now, Venezuela is reeling under the weight of this radical populism. No, America had it for 4 years, and America might get it again for another 4 years. If America have another populist leader, you never know what's going to happen. I'm not saying that America is going to be another Venezuela, but they're not very, very good examples of the success of radical populists. I don't want to get into guys who were populists as well and who were radicals. I don't want to call the names, go back in time, because what good is it going to make? Because we know what happened. We have had wars following the reigns of radical populist leaders. Am I demeaning populism? No. Am I saying that radicalism sometimes adds more to the isms? Yes. And anything, radical left or right, will have a sort of unsavory reaction or action on the system. So my program tonight is not to try to make up your minds, especially if you live in America, as to how you should vote, but I think it's a timely conversation to be had. And my view is not to talk about the current American election, is to look to see what radical populism or whatever impact it can have on global elections outcome. And my conclusion is that it will have, or it has the propensity to influence elections around the world. And I believe that it is very likely that the globe will see more populist leaders within the next decade or so. And that is the story. That's the program. That is my presentation. That is the case made. I hope no one believes that in any way, shape, or form that my program had a particular agenda to support one particular team, one particular party, one particular ideology. That certainly is not the intention. The intention is to speak about what I see as a more radical form of populism. Define populism in the most basic way, present it to the viewers, people who consume my program, and to suggest what I think this radical form will mean for global elections outcome in the future. And that's it. So the case has been made. The program has been presented. I expect us to continue to have a conversation about this topic and others. And I'm looking forward to engage as much as possible. For those of you who are going to vote in an election anywhere, America, Dominica, Canada, England, wherever, always be very thorough with the issues, ask questions, and vote. Cast your vote for the individual or individuals you believe best represent your values and the fundamentals upon which your country has been built. And if you do so, you will elect the best government for your people. That's the most I'm willing to say when it comes to the vote. But think critically, analyze the information, make a wise decision. Because the decision that we make today may very well determine the fortunes of our country and our own progress moving forward. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing. Please drop me a question if you have one. I really didn't plan to take any live questions today, but I'm looking forward to interacting with you after the program. And I'm certainly going to be here again some other time for another episode of Politics and Power. Have a good one, and let the conversation continue.